You know when a movie is just billed as just like intense and crazy and you kind of just end up putting it on the back burner forever? That is what happened with this movie. The longer I waited to watch it, the more intimidating it got. Hey there, creepy peeps. I'm Nightmare Maven. Welcome back to my channel. If you happen to be new here, welcome. I talk about horror movies and books every single week. So if you end up liking this video, you should subscribe. Thank you so much to Glenn for requesting this video. It's always interesting to make a review for a movie after it's been out for a while and it feels like everything that needs to be said about this movie has been said. I think that's like a YouTube struggle though, if I'm honest. Because this movie has been out for a little bit, I did look up the reviews before and after watching the movie. I made sure to avoid the spoilery reviews beforehand. There are 3 scenes in particular that the reviews all mention: the monologue, the final confrontation with David, and the very final scene of the movie. So in this video, I'm going to stick to my interpretations of those 3 scenes in particular because those seem to be the ones that stuck with everybody the most. And I much prefer to talk about like thematic elements in movies and what I interpret them to symbolize. Anyway, that sounded like the most pretentious bullshit. I really said, I have a degree in film studies. But you know what I mean. So let's talk about Resurrection. Resurrection follows single mother Margaret, whose daughter is getting ready to go off to college when a man from her past returns unexpectedly and puts Margaret and her daughter in danger. The movie is essentially about Margaret's carefully constructed life just completely falling apart the minute she sees this man from her past, and her life unravels at breakneck speed. It's an exploration of trauma and abusive relationships and what comes with you even after you've escaped an abusive relationship. So when the movie opens, I gotta say I was genuinely confused about what Margaret's profession was because I thought she was a therapist. Because when we first meet her, she's giving advice to one of her like employees, like an intern or something, I think, whose name is Gwen, giving her advice about Gwen's shitty boyfriend or partner or whatever. And we see glimpses into Margaret's life as the intro credits go until Margaret plans everything. Everything is like compartmentalized from her sexy time to her appearance. She's completely in control of everything. It's all by design in the movie because we see how quickly her composure crumbles the minute she sees David. So when Margaret first sees David at like a work conference or something like that, she has such a visceral reaction. It's jarring. And then her confrontation with David in the park just leads to more confusion for the viewer. And then we get to the monologue, which is one of the scenes everybody is talking about for this movie. And it completely changes everything we thought about the narrative up until this point. The stasis of the camera, the way it doesn't move, suggests that Margaret is like psychologically also in stasis. Like I mentioned at the beginning of the movie, we think she's well put together and just, you know, she works really hard. But as she tells her story, we start to see, oh, this is a response to the trauma she's experienced. It just throws everything into question because we don't actually know what happened at all, like prior to what we see in the movie. There's no flashbacks ever in the movie to give us any context. The way that they chose to film this scene and edit it, or lack of editing, plays with kind of our natural instincts as to like what we think is the truth and what we think is lying. Like throughout this monologue, it's like 8 minutes or so, something like that. The camera does not cut away at all. Like doesn't cut away to Gwen, who is listening. We know she's listening to this, but it doesn't cut away to her reaction. Filmmaker Francis Truffaut observed once that movies in which people lie require more shots than those where the characters are telling the truth. It's certainly not a hard and fast rule. Nothing in film is. It was just something I thought of as I was watching this scene. And I think the filmmakers in Resurrection are playing with that idea. Like this is Margaret's truth. The fact that the camera is in a close-up shot of her not only suggests that she is imprisoned by these thoughts, but it keeps the focus on her. Again, it doesn't cut away to any flashbacks or to Gwen's reaction. The fact that she is shrouded in darkness, we see the darkness as representing like the unknown, because you can't see anything, fear, evil, which I think is super duper important. It, like, the whole point of her story is not that she escaped a physically and emotionally abusive relationship and just a really shitty abusive person. That's not her ultimate conclusion. Her ultimate conclusion is that she is a bad person. I think that's her truth that she's imprisoned by in this scene. I think the contrast between like the dark and light is super important when you take into account the very last scene of the movie, or the last sequence of the movie is so bright, so white, it's just awash in light. A lot of reviews have pointed out it's very dreamy, soft, be suggesting that it's not really happening, which I am kind of on board with. If darkness is like fear and evil and the unknown, light kind of instinctively evokes on us like the truth, you know, being able to see everything clearly, goodness. I think again, filmmakers are playing with this here, that this is Margaret's truth again. This is what she wants to believe, especially after having just killed David. So she's completely removed the source of the trauma. So once she's done it, it's like in her mind, everything should be perfect now and everything should go back to the way it was, but even better. I feel like that's supported by Margaret giving Ben to Abby, you know, to hold for a little bit, and the way she looks at Abby holding the baby is, I feel like she's very much seeing her 18-year-old self with her child, and it's like, you know, like this is how it was supposed to be. I also saw quite a few reviews mention like the gasp at the end of the movie further supports that this is a dream, because every time she has a nightmare about Ben in the movie, she wakes up like gasping for air. I can totally see that, especially given that like the reality of her situation is that the damage she's caused to her relationship with Abby won't be fixed simply by her killing David. We're gonna step back to the previous sequence here, because I feel like the biggest debate I've seen in reviews and comments is what the fuck is going on in that scene where she cuts David open and we see a baby there. The film is super rooted in reality. Like nothing else up until that point has really suggested that there's anything supernatural going on. But this is also the horror genre, and the horror genre is not a stranger to things otherworldly, things of the supernatural. My personal take is that it is a metaphor, like it's a physical manifestation of Margaret's trauma and David's manipulation. Margaret mentions in her monologue about like her story that David gave her alcohol and pills all the time, on top of the psychological torture of making her do these kindnesses. So I think it's totally plausible to believe that because of that intense psychological manipulation, Margaret, maybe a part of her like did actually believe that Ben was still alive inside of David. But even more than that, I feel like she just feels an intense guilt over what she did. And that's what David is holding over Margaret's head when he keeps mentioning, like, don't you hear him crying, etc., etc. Like that's just him making her feel guilty. So I think when she cuts into David's stomach and finds Ben, I don't think she actually finds a baby. I think it's just a really cool and intense visual way to show that happening. And that's all I think it is. I don't think it's meant to be like necessarily that she's hallucinating it or that it's actually happening. I think it's just a cool way within the film to represent what her mind was going through, if any of that makes sense. If nothing else, it makes for a super intense moment in the film, because again, you're not really expecting that. Let me know what your interpretation is of the ending. It comes to like David and Ben being in his stomach and the very end of the movie. Definitely let me know in the comments. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, give it a thumbs up. Subscribe if you're new here. Become a creepy peep today, which you should totally do. It's great for your health. I will see you very soon with a new video. Until then, stay strange. Bye.